Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I apologize for like the 10-day hiatus. I think the next one is not going to be quite as long. Next week, I am back home and back to a relatively regular schedule of at least 2 streams a week. So please forgive me for that. I'm having a more active social life and visited my family and. Yeah, I'm between like different life steps, so I just took the time to be with everyone I love, and that includes you guys, just a little bit less maybe than usual. We have a metric ton of news to talk about. I don't know how many viewers I will get. The last few streams have been absolutely disastrous when it comes to live viewership. YouTube seemingly has completely forgotten about my channel, but hey, I will have to get into the game back somehow. And we do have a lot to talk about. Plus, we are getting close to pretty big events. Next week, we have the Google Pixel 10 announcement. I actually think that I'll be able to make it. I hope. I will let you know on Twitter. Subscribe here to the channel, hit the notification bell. That way you are informed. And of course, join the channel Discord. That way you are notified way in advance about my broader plans, not just my streaming plans. Plus, over there, I also react in general to all the news. When I don't have time to stream, I'll still check the messages there. So let's hope we can all find each other and react to all of this together. The iPhone news, the Google Pixel news, and all the leaks and rumors in between. So now that we've gotten some preliminary stuff out of the way, let me hit you with some big stuff, because we don't always have actual like Apple verified news. Very often we just quote unquote have rumors, leaks and stuff like that. Well, we are starting today with a very good news for Apple Watch users in the United States. As you know, Apple lost a patent dispute regarding the blood oxygen sensor in the newer Apple Watch generations. That's the Series 9, the Series 10, Apple Watch Ultra 2, and now, after some re-engineering, they are back. And here's what Apple is officially saying us. Apple will introduce a redesigned blood oxygen feature for some Apple Watch Series 9, 10, and Apple Watch Ultra 2 users through an iPhone and Apple Watch software update coming later today. So very important, first public service announcement. It is coming today, and it's happening in the form of a software update that's happening both on the iPhone and the Apple Watch. On the Apple Watch, it's watchOS 11.6.1. Say hi to my little... Oh, Jesus, she does not want to be. But you also shouldn't be on my cables. I have so many cables lying around, and by the way, I touched her once. This is what's happening to my hand. So I'm not even sure if I'm allergic against her. It's just so much hair. It just gets everywhere and just makes you like sneeze and get red eyes. But it's not quite an allergy. So yeah, if I get like puffy in the face, then you can, I guess, become a dermatologist like me and study allergies. So, following this update, sensor data from the blood oxygen app on Apple Watch will be measured and calculated on the paired iPhone, and results can be viewed in the respiratory section of the Health app. This is an interesting phrasing that I've seen some people misconstrue. People saying it's measured and calculated on the paired iPhone. I'm not sure what measured means, because if the sensor data is generated on the Apple Watch, that's obviously stuff that the iPhone doesn't need to measure. Like, calculate is enough of a word. So I assume the original patent really had some clause about like, oh, it's not just data collection of oxygen stuff, but it's also actually like analyzing it on the Apple Watch. And because in most cases Apple Watches are paired with iPhones, I think Apple just decided, you know what, for Apple Watches in the United States, we're gonna force you to go through this workaround. So basically, the Apple Watch might not be showing you that itself, might not be analyzing it itself, but your iPhone can. And again, since your iPhone is pretty much a given if you have an Apple Watch, I know some people who try to make Apple Watches work with Android devices or even to go completely phoneless because newer Apple Watches have like an eSIM functionality, but that's the minority of a minority of a minority of a minority inside the Apple Watch community. Yeah, and if you want to access your data, go to the respiratory section of the Health app. And this update was enabled by a recent US Customs ruling. I assume that given the fact that Apple is the bigger company here in question, like that Massimo company really is like nothing in comparison to Apple. They're basically a patent troll. I think the United States said, you know what? Apple actually ships a product. Apple actually generates like tax revenue for the United States. Apple actually hires people in the United States. Apple is important on the stock market. We are not gonna ignore the patent underlying it, but we're gonna let Apple get away with basically the cheapest workaround imaginable. So yeah, I think this is actually a very smart thing, and who knows, maybe down the line, United States users will be able to get the full oxygen measuring experience that people outside of the United States are getting. There will be no impact to Apple Watch units previously purchased that include the original blood oxygen feature. So that's important because if you bought your Apple Watch before this took effect, that patent ruling, that unfortunate patent ruling, obviously you still maintain your capabilities, and obviously if you're outside of the United States where the patent ruling doesn't apply, you're still getting your full functionality. And of course, Apple still also mentions other health functionality that your newer Apple Watches deliver: ECG, sleep apnea, fall detection, sleep tracking, wrist temperature setting, the Vitals app, the Noise app, the Medications app, the Mindfulness app. I don't think they even have like crash detection in here, right? Because fall detection eventually got improved on and included not just you personally falling down, but also your car crashing. We have Angelica in the chat and Rosa in the chat saying hey, and Angelica commenting on me being back. Yeah, I'm trying to be back. I think next stream I'll probably make it on like Sunday. We have Ben Vinny joining the chat. Oh, by the way, shout out to all the MarkTech Pro Max supporters. I forgot. I'm a terrible YouTuber. I've been gone for 10 days. I forgot how to do it all. So shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max Maximus, and Jonathan, our MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. And shout out to Ben Vinny, who just chatted, finally catching up on your live, who is a MarkTech Pro Max supporter over on Patreon. So you can support this channel with super chats, super stickers right while I'm live. You can become a supporter over on Patreon. Plenty of ways to encourage me to actually stream more regularly than I've been doing recently. And yeah, Ben Vinny, I'm also very happy to have you here. That's why I warned everyone in the Discord about me going live, which is funny because usually I go live about like 5 p.m. German time, which is a tad too early for most people. From what I've understood, most people prefer it like around 6 p.m.-ish my time, right? So like and then you can calculate your time, right, for it, like 5 p.m. in the UK at that time, stuff like that. But now I'm streaming at 7:30 p.m., which I assume is going to be a little bit late for most people who have gotten used to my streaming schedule, if you want to call it such. Yeah, so I'm very happy that anyone is here. Guys, please leave likes, please leave comments. I love interacting with a lively comment section, love getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements. We can have even small debates sometimes. Some of the people here who are some of the most engaged in the community, either here on YouTube or in Discord, have started out as even like somewhat haters. Like I remember Riley coming into the stream, our biggest yapper as we call him around here. I don't think he is with us today. Like really being super aggressive in the chat, but then hey, the talk evolved, right? And now he's a big part of the community. Yeah, but that's it for the big public service announcement. You see, though, we have a lot to talk about still. I just want to very briefly catch up with you on iOS 26 Beta 6, which came out early this week. This one is fantastic. I've been very disappointed with Beta 5, but then again, I always warn people that betas are incredibly non-linear in a way. So a beta 2 might seem fantastic, but then just to add one more feature in beta 4 or 5, suddenly the system becomes slow, the battery life becomes unpredictable, apps start behaving in an unpredictable way. So this is why I always warn, just because one beta version might sound promising, might have few bugs, might have good performance and battery life, please, if you have really like mission critical things on your phone, on your iPad, on your Mac, like your job depends on it, your income depends on it, you have crucial family notifications you just cannot afford to miss, please do not install betas, even public ones. Apple has also really released iOS 26 beta 6. Well, I hope that really helps the iPad, because I've actually had some UI issues on the iPad. Let me see, is this like just happening like right now? Oh yeah, well, it's a public beta, right? And they have a new build, so I hope that they actually are fixing, because on the well, great, well, now it's not just a public service announcement, but it's also breaking news. That's fantastic. We have iOS 26 beta 6, a new build for developers that is coming out alongside the public beta. We seem to already have the public beta 3 for watchOS 26, tvOS 26, and HomePod 26. It's interesting. Does Apple still not just call it HomeOS 26? That would be so much simpler. I think that tvOS and HomePod like should be merged some way in terms of naming. I know they are very different platforms, but once they bring out a HomePod with a screen, we have macOS Tahoe being released. Oh yeah, and we have iOS 26 and iPadOS 26 public beta 3. My control center on watchOS is bugs. I hope they fix it ASAP. Yeah, beta 6 is impressive, and the major reason behind that is actually this, right? So thank you to Ollie's Tech here. But I think this is obviously slowed down, but we have new animations in iOS 26 beta 6, app opening, app closing, everything in the operating system just feels bouncier in the control center and things like that. So Apple is really living up to the liquid portion of liquid glass. Everything is responsive and smooth, and everything is bouncy, everything is more playful, everything is more reactive, but also now everything is faster. Like literally the new app opening animations, they're not just smooth and they're redesigned, right? Once they slow down, you actually see, for example, how the icon, for example, so Apple's iOS icons, right? They have like a center main element, but then around it, and that's why they can do, for example, something like a clear theme, right? They just have a color, right? Or a color gradient, or like something that's still connected to that main element, but basically it's separate, right? And Apple basically is using the way that those icons are built so that they can stretch the icon, right, without stretching the main center element, the actual thing that is recognizable in the icon, right, while then stretching the outlines, right? Stretching, for example, as you can see here, the gray in the camera app, or here in the settings app, or here, wait, it's reverse. It needs to be the other way around here. So that was the camera app. Oh, come on. Do you have that for Safari? Yeah, please. So you can see that in Safari, that white grayish tone on Safari, right? That one is stretching. and meanwhile that actual center Safari element is not changing. So Apple is really like leveraging all their power as the platform holder. Not only, of course, have they designed parts of iOS by themselves, but they also dictate quite a lot to third-party developers. That's why, for example, icon theming on iOS these days is better than on Android, right? Because Apple says, no, you just cannot build your icon as like a completely flat thing. You have like a main color and you have like a center element. That way we can theme it, right? That's why, for example, the Twitter app looks pretty with clear theming and stuff like that. Man, there's so much hair from Bella just from my cat, just from jumping on here once. It's crazy. But like with Twitter, for example, you know that new X logo that's so stupid, right? You had like one of the world's most recognizable logos and you just gave it up for absolutely nothing. But they have like this weird like texture on that black background around the X, and that doesn't react as nicely to being clear themed as like one continuous color around the X would have looked. Just saying, like one more in an infinite list of stupid decisions by Elon. But yeah, so iOS 26 is fast, it feels good, and there's actually new stuff here when it comes to iOS 26 and all other releases. So watch this stream and right afterwards go to installing it. Or hey, you can even start downloading it in the background, right? As long as your internet is still fast enough to stream me simultaneously, please. And you can see that the reactions are actually super positive. So when it comes to the actual liquid glass designs, people seem to be pretty much like bought in at this point. Apple has fixed a lot of readability issues, like with how they handle text and contrast inside like glass bubbles, right? And now people also seem to be really positively reacting to what at least is perceived as like a speed increase. And people are even saying, like, given that iOS 26 is coming out for devices as quote unquote old as an iPhone 11, right? A 3 gigs of RAM, A13 based device. Now those old devices almost get like a new lease on life with that kind of fast and smoothie performance. Yeah. So you can read up what exactly is changed. You can watch videos about it. All I wanted to tell you is I'm actually really recommending now you look into iOS 26, not specifically to install it yourself, but specifically in the context of now I believe the betas are far along. We're just a month away from the actual release of iOS 26 that you can actually... I'm sorry, I just have a hair right like around my lips. It's so fucking disgusting. I'm trying to not make a dirty joke. You guys know me. That's a thing I always try to not do. This is still a family-friendly show. I will say like the F word occasionally, the UCK word, not the other one, Jesus Christ. But yeah, I try to be somewhat palatable to like younger audiences. Yeah, but the reason why I'm saying this, I've seen how the internet got really angry about beta 1 and beta 2 and beta 3, and there has been a lot of back and forth in Apple's decisions. First, they launched a very aggressive version of liquid glass, then they toned it down because they were dealing with readability issues, visibility stuff, accessibility concerns, but then they tuned that, improved it, and relaunched a more aggressive version of liquid glass. And that's exactly how betas are supposed to work. And that's why it was so insane to me when people were saying, oh, Apple is reacting too much to Twitter comments, or Apple is not believing in themselves. And I'm like, no, it's just a beta. They know it's still being used by regular users, so they just toned it down a little so the system is still usable. And meanwhile, in the background, they're working on returning mostly, maybe not even fully, to that original vision. And then eventually they merge all of what they've learned. Everything they've learned from Twitter and stuff like that, but also what their own engineers are learning. And of course, what also people on the betas are giving them info on, right? That's very important. That's what the betas are for. The betas are not just for like Zolotech to make a video about it, or about Brandon Butch making a Geekbench on it. It's really about you experiencing something new from Apple and telling Apple, this is something we like, this is something we don't like. And it seems like now we are at beta 6, now we are even at beta 6 version 2, and it's actually very well received. I have to say, I am not quite as sold on the version of Liquid Glass that's on Mac. Not in a, oh, it's worse than it was before. I conceive it more. I perceive it more of a side grade. At least we get more functionality, like a full control center. But I don't think it feels quite as intuitive or quite as fitting on Macs, because you interact with Macs through keyboard and mouse. It's a very clicky thing, right? While if you tap on something, if you swipe on something, basically iOS, iPadOS, watchOS even, right? That bounciness and even that like transparency kind of makes more sense to me. But I think that it will take actually very little work to make Mac feel similarly like fit in with Liquid Glass. I just think it needs a little bit more tuning. So I'll keep you informed on my opinion on that over time. So yeah, that's also, it's funny because we went from a public service announcement to actually breaking news with the new release of iOS 26 Beta 6 version 2. But now we are getting into the bread and butter of this channel, which is processor leaks and rumors and discussions. And say hi to Bella again. I will so regret holding her up because all her hair, yep, that's all her hair, will be flowing around me. But yeah, I just couldn't resist. Basically, what has happened yesterday is that Mac Rumors got a huge leak of what processors are gonna be powering the next generation of Apple devices, right? Well, for a while, for example, it's very clear that like, oh, the iPhone 17 Pro gets the A19 Pro chip and stuff like that. And then we even had some follow-ups on it. For example, like for a while, we believed that the iPhone 17 Air is gonna get an A19 chip, right? But now we think it's actually gonna get an A17 Pro chip, just with one fewer GPU cores than on the A19 Pro inside the Pro models, right? But this is something that has been building for a while. The thing I am reacting to today is super new, and it's actually a lot of devices at once. And I put two of the most interesting one in the thumbnail, which is the next Studio Display and the next Mac Pro, though we will get into detail about those products. But first, we have to eat our veggies before we get to the meat and potatoes and the cheeseburgers and the hot wings and everything else in between. Let's start with the smaller stuff, like the new Apple TV. Now, anybody who's been following me for a while on this channel knows that I'm a big fan of the Apple TV. I believe it's by far the best box in the TV space. Obviously, it's not a console in that regard, but if you just want something that's extremely good for movies, TV shows, it supports the latest visual standards across HDR and stuff like that. It has obviously Apple TV, Apple TV Plus, and all those services. It gets good apps. It has the performance to run those apps well. It even has enough RAM and things like that to actually keep stuff in the background so you don't constantly have to reload your apps. Well, the current generation of Apple TV is running on a now pretty old A15 processor, and now it seems like we're about to get a new generation of Apple TV. And This is funny to anyone who's been following Apple processor news for a while. And no, I don't mean John Prosser. I mean Apple's processors, like the chips Apple puts inside. 3 nanometer, the first generation 3 nanometer by TSMC N3B. That's the chip node that's powering the A17 chip. Or to be precise, we never actually got an A17, but we got the A17 Pro, and it's powering the M3 chips, right? M3, M3 Pro, M3 Max, and eventually the M3 Ultra. What's funny is everyone believed that Apple would just drop this node like a hot potato and immediately move towards N3E. But ever since Apple released the A18 on the last generation iPhone and started to transition to TSMC's second generation 3 nanometer node, N3E. And this year they're going to transition to TSMC's third generation 3 nanometer node, which is N3P. Apple has still put out new chips based on N3B. We have the A17 Pro powering the current generation iPad mini. We have the M3 Ultra, now not too long ago, coming to the Mac Studio alongside the M4 Max. And now it seems like the next generation Apple TV is going to be powered by a then 2-year-old A17 Pro. Now here I'm actually inclined to believe that Apple is not really building new chips. That was a big question with the M3 Ultra. Like, how are they doing this? Are they actually producing new M3 Maxes, or do they have so many piled up in inventory, right? For the Apple TV, I'm actually inclined to believe that this will be a highly binned version of the A17 Pro. For all I know, they could disable several E-cores in here, or 2 of the 6 GPU cores. You never know, right? The performance is there, the memory bandwidth is there, the cache is there. It will still be more powerful than the A15 chip in the Apple TV, the current generation Apple TV, even if they bin this one down more aggressively. So I think this is just inventory of A17 Pro chips that were neither usable for the obviously the iPhones powered by A17 Pro, like my iPhone 15 Pro Max, but also not usable for the iPad mini with the same chip. So, there have been multiple rumors about the new Apple TV coming in 2025 with a new A-series processor, but it hasn't been clear which chip Apple would use until now. The A17 Pro was designed for the iPhone 15 Pro models and is used on the iPad mini. One noticeable difference here is that in theory the A17 Pro supports Apple Intelligence, but it should be noted that it also depends on the amount of memory they're going to give this device. For example, while the iPhone 15 Pros had 6 gigs of RAM, the iPhone 13 Pros, that had the A15 chip, they had 6 gigs of RAM, but the A15 chip inside the Apple TV 4K was more like the A15 chip inside the iPhone 13 non-Pros, and that had 4 gigs of RAM. Now I'm getting it right. So basically the idea is the A17 Pro has always been paired thus far with at least 8 gigs of memory. That includes the iPad mini, that includes the iPhone 15 Pro, right? Now, the current generation Apple TV runs on 4 gigs of RAM. Is Apple gonna significantly increase the cost of materials here? Don't forget, the A15 chip here, I believe, also runs on slower LPDDR4X memory. While the A17 Pro uses faster LPDDR5 6400 megatransfers per second memory. So double the memory and faster memory. Now that's a similar upgrade to what Apple did on the iPad mini, right? That chip jumped several generations and it doubled memory. Is Apple gonna do the same on the Apple TV, a sub $200 product? I'm not sure, but it's going to be fascinating. I mean, it would be definitely a marketing point for the Apple TV to support Apple Intelligence. Maybe not immediately, but don't forget, this is Apple does not update the Apple TV every year, or sometimes not even every 2 years. So there is a chance that Apple is just going to say, you know what, iOS 26.4 is going to come with the new large language model Siri. Just and we're gonna keep selling this TV for a while. A17 Pro comes with also like better support for games, so maybe we could see ports like the recent Resident Evil games, right? That did come to iPhone and iPad and Mac. Maybe we could make them run now on Apple TV, right? At least at like 30 FPS, 480p or something like that. Maybe they, by using Apple's like Metal Effects upscaler, they at least could look somewhat 720p-ish, 1080p-ish on a 4K screen. It's going to be interesting how exactly they handle this. I still think that Apple needs something console-like down the road. I don't think it needs to be a huge success. I almost think that it needs to just show Apple that there is a market in the Apple community for higher end games. And Apple is now bringing higher end games, but they're bringing them to iPhone, to iPad. And that's not the ideal format for those games, right? Touchscreen limited, relatively low amounts of storage, and things like that. So an Apple TV, somewhere between like an Apple TV and Mac Mini, I think Apple could create something here, but who knows, right? But yeah, part of this leak, we're now knowing that the next Apple TV is going to be powered by an A17 Pro chip, and that of course comes in line with the fact that we also expected to have a new in-house Apple Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip. So that's now a rumor for kind of almost every Apple device, right? At least iPhones down to like HomePods and and Apple TVs. This was originally rumored to be a Bluetooth, a Wi-Fi 6E chip, but then subsequent rumors have come out and said no, Apple has actually tested it. It's good enough for Wi-Fi 7. So and there are no clear details on if it's going to be the latest version of Bluetooth, which technically Bluetooth 6 is out. It does not really do much over Bluetooth 5.4, but hey, Apple is known to adopt newer Bluetooth standards relatively early, maybe not quite as aggressively as they did like 10 years ago, because the Bluetooth technology has largely stagnated ever since Bluetooth 4 low energy. Yeah, but definitely some interesting chip stuff happening in the world of the Apple TV, but also nothing crazy, right? It's a 2-gen chip upgrade after roughly 2 years. So expect, I guess, like the A19 Pro from a 2027 Apple TV or something like that. And in the vein of those rumors that brought us that Apple TV reveal, a new leak also confirms that the next low-cost iPad model is going to be powered by an A18 chip. That's up from the A16 on the current low-cost iPad model, which does make sense. Now, a lot of people might think, well, I mean, this is like a $400 product, roughly, right? Why does it have like a better chip than the Apple TV? Because obviously it needs to make room also for other things like the screen and everything else, right? Wouldn't it make sense to make it A17 Pro? Because Apple already uses that chip, for example, on the iPad mini. Well, actually, no, because there is an A18 Pro, but then there is an A18. And the A18 is very similar to the A18 Pro, but it cuts some Pro functionality. Whether it's more cut in software and actual hardware remains to be seen. But it also has significantly less cache, right? It halves the cache, that makes the die overall smaller, and it cuts one GPU core. This could be an even further downbinned A18, right? It might only have 4 of its 5 cores actually enabled. But yeah, fascinatingly, next gen low cost iPad model is going to feature a processor that's better than what's in the current iPad mini. So that actually sounds like a pretty good deal. But yeah, don't forget that A17 only existed in the Pro version, and the A18 is actually a cheaper version of the A18 Pro. So in a way, A18 is also cheaper than A17 Pro. Yeah, but those are details that I don't think most people care about, right? The finding builds on a previous report by Bloomberg that indicate Apple plans to launch a 12th generation entry-level iPad in the spring of 2026. That would obviously make it relevant for like the back-to-school season. The device is expected to maintain the current design while incorporate the faster processor. I do hope there will be some changes to design, like Apple giving this compatibility with the Apple Pencil Pro chip. The Apple Pencil Pro would be great. Currently, it supports like that stupid USB-C Apple Pencil that does not charge through your iPad, needs to be charged through like a cable. That's silly. I get it as like a cheaper alternative to the Apple Pencil Pro because it's like $50 less expensive, but also simultaneously it's not very exciting, right? Especially since we are now on like that second generation of this design of the current base iPad. And now we've had obviously several iPad Pros and stuff and iPad Airs to support the Apple Pencil Pro. Well, not several, right? I mean, several iPad Pros and several iPad Airs to support it. So yeah, I'm very happy that I'm very hopeful that we'll get more stuff here from Apple in that regard. So not just the chip swap, but this is purely speculation. This is coming from me about things that I want so that I could actually more aggressively recommend this device. I also wouldn't be surprised if Apple eventually increased its price to like a base $399. To be honest, $349 is pretty low for Apple. But yeah, we'll have to see what the bill of materials is for Apple. Obviously, they also have to fight with issues like tariffs, especially going into the United States, an overall like less strong world economy. So yeah, maybe they will see a reason to increase pricing. I mean, they would also have to give this device at least 2 GB of additional memory. The current A16 powered base iPad has only 6 GB. It does support the new windowing system inside iPadOS 26 though. So yeah, obviously an A18 with 8 gigs of RAM, which also uses faster memory, by the way. It uses 7500 megatransfers memory rather than 6400 that's used by the A16 chip. Even if this is a pretty bin down version of the A18, this will still be a nice upgrade, especially for anybody multitasking with the iPad. But going from a pretty predictable upgrade, right, from an A16 to an A18, let's jump to a pretty crazy rumor, and that's for the Studio Display 2. Now, I've never been a big fan of Apple's Studio Display. I think that 27 inches is a good display size, but if I'm paying $1,600, if I'm already paying for the amounts of aluminum, right, for the actual display and in the stand, then I kind of either want like a much better screen, so that's mini LED functionality, that's ProMotion functionality, or at least give me a larger screen, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be the full 32 inches of the Pro Display XDR, but give me like a round 30-inch display, right? Now again, this isn't even speculation. This is just me narrating at this point and complaining a little bit, but sorry, I was just checking my Discord. Thought that I had missed something. Nope, seems all is all right. But now we are seemingly getting a new generation of the Studio Display. Unfortunately, we don't have leaks about the actual panel, right? Is it mini LED? Is it tandem OLED? It's probably not gonna be. I think if Apple makes a tandem OLED standalone monitor, then it's gonna be the successor for the Pro Display XDR, not for the Studio Display, right? But we do have one spec point leaked for the new Studio Display, and that is that it is gonna get a huge upgrade in chips from what is currently the A13 Bionic, which, yes, is a second generation 7 nanometer, which is N7P, which is powering actually devices that are still getting iOS 26, mainly the iPhone 11 series. That being said, it's an old chip. But that being said, this is a monitor. Why does it even need a chip this powerful, right? Well, there are a few speculations here. Some that naturally come to mind is, of course, what the A13 already does, right? So it handles center stage, spatial audio. It handles Hey Siri functionality through the microphones, at least in the monitor, right? Obviously, with center stage, it doesn't just handle the center stage part of the camera pipeline, but it also gives it the ISP of the A13 chip, the image signal processor, and that image signal processor handles everything from like HDR to the frame rate of the camera. But again, this is not like the world's best camera ever. It does not really, like, we can argue that like the HDR pipeline that is supported by the A13, because don't forget, Smart HDR initially launched on the A12 chip, and now we are on like Smart HDR 5, probably Smart HDR 6 by the end of the year, right? Obviously, the A13 does not give you the best handling of contrast and color. But do you really need to jump all the way to an A19 Pro chip? My first thought when I initially was speculating with some people about, well, what chip would Apple upgrade the A13 to? Well, my first thought was, well, it's kind of a no-brainer to make this the A16, right? Well, why? Wait, the A16 is built on 4 nanometer, right? Which is technically a third generation 5 nanometer. While that's more expensive than 7 nanometer, it's a lot cheaper than chips built on 3 nanometer and soon 2 nanometer, okay? But there's also another portion of it, which is that the A16 chip is actually kind of the oldest chip that Apple still keeps manufacturing. And the reason for that is the 5 nanometer / 4 nanometer plant that was built by TSMC in the United States, Arizona. That was built under the CHIPS Act by Biden. Obviously, Trump nowadays also wants chips to be built in the country. He also wants that revenue from those chips. And like, honestly, the ISP in the A16 is good enough, but yeah, maybe Apple wants to make it compatible with like Apple Intelligence, which is crazy because it's not like the Studio Display is a standalone product, and every single Apple Silicon processor supports Apple Intelligence, right? So I really don't know. Like, technically, Apple could run some crazy stuff on the A19 Pro itself, like some image upscaling functionality, maybe. And I've seen some people speculate, well, they're going to use it for stuff like Thunderbolt 5, right? Well, the Thunderbolt 5 is its own separate controller, and you don't need the CPU power of an A19 Pro to do this. This is crazy, in my opinion. I don't know how many A19 Pro chips Apple plans to build. But like, maybe they just want to order so many that they can push the pricing lower at TSMC. Maybe the yields are not that good and they actually have a decent amount of binned chips that they don't know what to do with. Maybe chips that have like 1 P core disabled, right? At that point, they're pretty much useless, obviously, for iPhones, because you don't really want to have less than 2 P cores on the chip. They might not have immediate plans to put it in the Apple TV because it's still too expensive. Well, now here you have a product that's $1,500, $1,600, like $2K with better stands. And maybe Apple thought, well, how about we put the A19 Pro in there? And I mean, that could also be, of course, the groundwork to also make it work on like a Pro Display XDR2. But this now is very much speculation. Yeah, but who knows what crazy features Apple could put inside the Studio Display 2 to justify putting into it an A19 Pro. I desperately hope they also really improved the screen quality. Again, either mini LED or some form of OLED, preferably tandem OLED, but I do realize that that would get crazy expensive on a 27-inch screen. Larger display, maybe, but then again, that's going to be more for the Pro Display XDR2 and, of course, ProMotion. I think ProMotion here is pretty much non-negotiable. It's something we really need. So, yeah, Apple, please don't hold this back from us. We also have more chip news. This one is kind of what I referred to previously as like the veggies. Let me actually check my... Okay, good. I'm sorry, I was just checking, like, my friends are baking together. So I just asked them if they needed like some kind of login for like Crunchyroll or Netflix, stuff like that, because yeah, I'm sharing this with everyone. um, yeah, but let's talk about the chip in the next generation of Apple Watch, because that will also give us some hints about other devices. Hint, hint. That's the news right next to it. The upcoming Apple Watch Series 11, Apple Watch Ultra 2, and Apple Watch SE 3 will have an updated S11 system in package. Because of how tightly everything is integrated, Apple does not call the Apple Watch processors SoCs, system on the chips. They're calling them system in package, but did not bring much in the way of processor performance improvements. I'm sorry, guys. It's 33 degrees still. The sun still hasn't set, and I have hair everywhere, so I will be sweating. Apple accidentally leaked some internal information about the upcoming chip. That's, of course, coming with all the extra news here. And it leaked that it will have the same TA310 architecture as the S9 and as the S10 chips in the Series 9 and Series 10 Apple Watch models. Apple does that actually pretty regularly on the Apple Watch, so they won't have big architectural leaps, but they will still rebrand the processor. Now, usually some other stuff happens, right? They will bring in a better neural engine, stuff like that, new functionality, new sensors and everything, and that will kind of justify the chip branding that they use. But overall, I would argue, they're not as aggressive in updating Apple Watch processors as they are iPhone chips or Apple Silicon on the Mac. So yeah, it's don't buy your Apple Watch because you always want the best chip. But then again, sometimes there's a pretty big leap. Usually that leap will also enable your device to get updates for longer. So yeah, maybe it's worth it to you then. Similarly, the S6, the S7, and the S8 were also built on the same core technology. That doesn't mean that there are no improvements in between. Sometimes there will even be a node jump, right? But Apple will still use the same core CPU architecture and just potentially clock it higher and stuff like that. So yeah, don't expect big chip gains this year, at least architecturally. It should be noted, of course, Apple is free to add more cores, clock them higher, add more memory, add faster memory, and add new technologies or expand on separate technologies on the die, whether it's the media engine, the neural engine, sensors that are being built into it, the amount of storage, the speed of the storage. So the exact details on how it performs will, of course, vary based on the final implementation of that chip. But yeah, the best part here, I think, is the fact that it's actually also coming to the next Apple Watch SE. That should make the cheapest entry-level Apple Watch actually quite nice in terms of longevity. I know a lot of people prefer the Apple Watch SE to buy for their kids. Apple has also been rumored to potentially drop either the cost of Apple Watch SE or at least the production cost, right? Because there were rumors that they're trying to build them out of plastic rather than aluminum, but then there have also been rumors that Apple has been internally dissatisfied with how the plastic performs, especially with like long term and with considerations regarding like looks down the road, but also like durability. So in that regard, I don't know if the next Apple Watch SE is still going to be aluminum or it's going to be the first plastic Apple Watch. But obviously, I'll keep you updated on this channel. Yeah, so no super big chip changes here. There are also some code names for future devices. Obviously, Apple is always working ahead. It's likely that the upcoming S12 chip for Apple Watch will use a new microarchitecture, also probably like some 3 nanometer node and 3P, or Apple goes a little crazy and puts it right on 2 nanometer. So yeah, if chip improvements are what you're looking for in the next Apple Watch, then wait for longer, right? I usually say that's not a big problem at all on the Apple Watch, and these days it's less of a problem than ever. I've seen like my mom still uses an Apple Watch Series 4. That's isn't on the latest OS version anymore, but it still performs absolutely fine. So I doubt that anything that's like on the S6 chip and above, and especially S9 chip on above, is gonna age that much anytime soon. If anything is gonna hold up Apple Watches eventually from getting software updates, in my opinion, is the fact that Apple has been very consistent, or if you want to put it in another way, pretty stingy, and has been putting like 1 gig of RAM into every Apple Watch for years and years and years. Not even the Ultra got like 2 gigs of RAM, even though like again, or 1.5 gigs or something like that. So maybe that could be a major change happening soon, but now we are completely back to the speculative aspect. There's been rumors, of course, surrounding stuff like the new Apple Watch Ultra. So recently we've got a leak for the actual screen resolution of the Apple Watch Ultra 3. I actually don't think I have that open. I have everything else open, but not this Apple Watch Ultra 3 resolution. So for a while we actually had the rumor that that the next generation Apple Watch is gonna get a larger screen. It actually has pretty thick bezels, especially if you compare it to like the regular Apple Watch series. And now we know that due to some leak code, that it's gonna have a few more pixels basically. So it goes from the current 410 by 502 to 422 by 514. So it's 12 pixels actually on each axis. And obviously, we're also expecting newer screen technology in general, like the Apple Watch Series 10, for example, introduced LTPO3 that has always-on refreshes every second, which allows it to actually show like your arm on the clock that shows seconds, even in always-on display mode, like showing it actually like live refreshing every second. So, and still be very efficient and have very good battery life doing so. Obviously, the Apple Watch Ultra is a battery beast. It probably could have done the same thing even with like an inferior LTPO2 technology, but alas, that's not what Apple chose to do. They did not update the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with that functionality via software, and they did not update the Apple Watch Ultra 2 hardware. So now we're waiting for the Apple Watch Ultra 3 with that new LTPO3 screen and a wide angle OLED that improves viewing angles on the screen. Other changes. There's a rumor that Apple will adopt a 5G modem. So Apple Watches have actually been stuck with 4G for quite a long time, and supposedly Apple is using a very low power optimized 5G modem from MediaTek that's going into the Apple Watch. And down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if they make their own modem, like a C3 Mini or something like that, right? That's optimized for the Apple Watch. So, yeah, pretty comprehensive image that we're slowly getting of the upcoming Apple Watch generation. Again, probably no giant performance increases, but then again, the Apple Watch Ultra is jumping now 2 generations in terms of chips and functionality. So, pretty cool stuff to look forward to. So I actually have to close some stuff so I can start being able to read the tabs that I have open. Based on the Apple Watch processor, there's also a new HomePod Mini coming. Oh, we have Riley, our number one yapper, who I mentioned before in the stream, joining the chat. We have news, chip news left and right. You've missed quite a lot of it already, but we do have more and more to come. And I know you're more interested in the Mac stuff anyway, so the ones before that were probably less interesting to you. This one is probably not going to be very interesting either, but the next HomePod Mini is gonna have a chip based on the S series processors that are currently inside the Apple Watch. A reference to a HomePod Mini equipped with a chip that uses T8310 microarchitecture was discovered in Apple code by Mac Rumors contributor Aaron Paris. The device has a B525 codename, which likely corresponds to the next-gen HomePod Mini, since the current codename is B520. The existing S9 and S10 chips have that moniker of being based on T8310, and so is the upcoming S11. Whether or not that means the HomePod Mini here uses the S8 or the S9, the S10, or the S11, I would almost bet it's going to be the S11, given that it's likely that the next Apple Watch SE is going to have it. So yeah, but again, there probably not gonna be any reason to like skip the HomePod Mini if it's gonna be S10 based. One thing that is gonna be much more impactful on the HomePod Mini is actually similar to what I mentioned about the Apple TV that's rumored to be getting the A17 chip, is a new modem, right? That in-house Apple modem. Again, this one is mentioning still Wi-Fi 6E. I believe this is based on outdated rumors, because there was a rumor about an Apple in-house modem that's Wi-Fi 6E. Then there were rumors that this chip, that modem, that's built for Wi-Fi 6E, is being targeted for the next HomePod and the next Apple TV. And after that, we had the rumor that, oh, that chip is actually capable of Wi-Fi 7. Now, again, the exact implementation remains up on Apple. It might not have 320 megahertz support or something like that. Apple might even artificially lock it down to Wi-Fi 6E on devices that have lower power, that where top speed is not as much the priority as range and things like that. But I believe that there is good reason to believe that if this is the same modem in question, that it would have Wi-Fi 7. That's the same thing I already mentioned, of course, for the HomePod, for the Apple TV. It's interesting that we still don't have much about a big HomePod. Now, we do have news about an upcoming HomePad, which is a big HomePod with a screen attached to it. So it makes you wonder if Apple is gonna launch still a traditional HomePod alongside it. I really hope they do. Because I really want to buy 2 HomePods and create a stereo speaker pair around my LG OLED TV. Um, but yeah, at least jumping to a new modem is going to be huge, specifically here for the HomePod Mini, because the current generation has actually seen a downgrade because the original big HomePod actually had Wi-Fi 5. And then because they were based on Apple Watch technology, the HomePod Mini and the HomePod 2 actually were downgraded to Wi-Fi 4. Now again, does it make that big of a difference in real world scenarios given how you use those products? Probably not, but just out of the feeling of what feels good to buy in 2025, I definitely like it would need to be at least Wi-Fi 6 so I don't feel pissed off when buying something like this. And again, no specific stuff about the big HomePod that does not have a screen. Only HomePod mini stuff. Riley saying, how you doing, Mark? I already commented a little bit in the beginning of the stream that I'm taking my free time right now to meet with family and friends and everything, so I apologize for not having the greatest streaming schedule. I should be back to a somewhat regular schedule the week after the next week. Right, so next week I'm still here. I'm still meeting friends, family, and then I'm going to Berlin, back and spending some time there as well. That's already planned up. I will try to make time for the Google Pixel 10 event coming next week. That's on Wednesday. I don't really have any plans for that, so unless something comes up or the weather just decides to fuck me again, like today it was 34 degrees Celsius, it's gonna be that tomorrow too, basically. So yeah, I'll let you know. But yeah, I'm actually doing really well. I'm feeling healthy, I'm losing weight, I'm eating well, I'm going to the gym again, meeting friends, spending time with family. I was for a week with my cousin, and then I got to spend some time with my nephew, my two nieces. So that was great time. And yeah, I apologize for not streaming during it, but I think that's the best for me right now. Now, more chip news. This one is actually a return to an old rumor that was then kind of overlaid by a bad rumor that I never understood. So for quite a while, oh, we have M1 Max, haven't seen you in a while in the live chat. Welcome to the stream, brother. And that is about the Apple Vision Pro 2. Obviously, the Apple Vision Pro launched with the M2 processor, even though M3 was already out. And then M4 followed like in the not too distant future afterwards. So people were like, ooh, it's a $3,500 product with a 1-gen old chip, now a 2-gen old chip, and soon it might be a 3-gen old chip, because we are rumored to be getting a next gen M5 based iPad Pro as early as this October. Well, Mark Gurman came out and said for a while that the next Apple Vision Pro might actually be based on the M4. And that kind of clashed with previous rumors by a bunch of people, I believe, primarily Min-Chi Kuo, who said that no, it's actually going to be based on the M5. So, and this is actually brought up here. We had early rumors and then more recent rumors. In a series of posts, however, Mac rumors cite some sort of Apple code leak. Oh, it's interesting. I'm actually reacting to a Mac rumors leak on 9 to 5 Mac. So I didn't know that this was actually part of the same leak, but that's interesting and it makes sense. So there's actually also new iPad mini stuff. Do I have that open too? Oh no, there's more stuff that I missed. Jesus, the timestamps for this video are gonna be crazy because there's a new topic every 5 minutes. But let's get to the Apple Vision Pro, I guess, which is alongside those leaks that we just reacted to the Apple Watch, the HomePod Mini, the basic HomePod, the Studio Display 2. Well, it seems like the iPad Mini is also in it, but also the Apple Vision Pro 2, and it says that it's going to be powered by the M5 chip. Do I think M5 will be 2 nanometer? No. And I still have like what, 100 bucks? What was it, $150? Who remembers? I have to go back. But basically, you guys by January, no, not by January 1st, by like December 31st, which could be either a week before it, because I'm probably not going to stream during the holidays because I actually have some plans. Jesus, my social life is killing my streams. Jesus. But at the very worst, very early January, once I'm back, um, I will be here to probably pay out some money for a charity of your guys' choosing. I'll let you do a poll, or you know what? I'm actually gonna leave the poll to Discord. I think that actually makes the biggest sense. I'm gonna probably pick up like 4 or 5 charities that I trust, and then I'm just gonna let you guys choose between them. I don't want anything weird, right? I don't want like savethedodo.org, right? Or shit like that. But like the International Red Cross or something like that. Why am I talking so much about this? Well, I have bet with the stream, with the channel, with the community that I think Apple is going to launch at least one 2 nanometer based processor this year. So in 2025. So if it doesn't come out by December, I have to give some money to charity. Why do I not think anymore that either A19 or M5 are going to be 2 nanometer? I think that the real answer behind it is that first generation 2 nanometer actually looks not that big, right? Especially for Apple. No saving gorillas foundation. Well, I mean, if it's an actual foundation that saves real gorillas, but like saving the dodo, like the dodo does not exist, so it cannot be saved. That's a different thing. Riley, you master yapper here. Bella, don't eat my cables. Jesus Christ. But why do I not think that M5 and A19 are going to be 2 nanometer? Well, first of all, seems like 2 nanometer is good, but seems like a lot of companies are really, really investing in N2P, right? Like basically second generation GAFET. Seems like they're getting a bit better control of it. It's a little bit similar to N3B to N3E. But the other point is that Apple's orders for N3P are gonna be massive, and that's gonna help tremendously bring down the cost. And given how expensive 2 nanometer is about to be, I just don't think that Apple is gonna let go of the chance of buy N3 based processors that are like 5, 10, maybe 15% worse for like 40-50% less money. And the reason why Apple is going to be able to have such a huge mass order, well, we're even going to talk about how Apple is giving the A19 Pro to the iPad mini, right? We just talked about how it's going to come to the Studio Display. But there is more to it, and that is that Apple is going to be building their private cloud compute infrastructure. That's their AI in the cloud, right? So Apple is building a lot of AI on device. That's why they made 8 gigs of RAM standard. That's why they made A17 and A18 standard. Sorry, she was just eating the MacBook cable. But if they're gonna build out private cloud compute, but there is also another part to it, which is they're not just going to build AI servers. Apple is currently thinking of replacing Amazon cloud services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, at least internally with their own stuff. And down the road, they might even think of offering those cloud services to other companies. Like you have to think about it. Apple currently does offer iCloud to developers. It's called CloudKit, right? But they're basically building iCloud on top of Google Cloud or on top of Amazon Web Services, right? And then, so they have to pay Google and Amazon for that. And only then do they charge the developers. So Amazon needs to make a profit here, and then Apple needs to make a profit here. So Apple cannot charge very competitive prices here. So, if Apple builds those servers around their own infrastructure, potentially infrastructure that's extremely good at dealing with the biggest problem of modern cloud, which is power consumption, which also comes with massive impacts on water demands and massive impacts on cooling demands, right? If Apple can build their servers around N3P based chips, so M5 Ultras or some kind of like cloud optimized version of M5, then yeah, then Apple could just mass order N3P. And don't forget, N3P is basically the last great FinFET node, right? After that, TSMC is going GAAFET, Samsung is already on GAAFET and kind of goofing it up. Intel might go completely bankrupt for all we know and might sell off uh, their chip fabs, right? So yeah, I think that M5 is going to be N3P, and I think a big part about this is that Apple wants to order as many N3P chips as possible and make them as reliably as possible. Don't have to deal with potentially poor yields or poor supply of 2 nanometer, and then in 2-3 years they would just update all of that stuff to like A16, A16P, right? So yeah, I might have to give money to charity because I've bet with you guys that Apple would have some 2 nanometer out this year. I don't really believe that anymore, but hey, they might surprise us. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe Apple might surprise launch a modem on 2 nanometer, which would make absolutely no sense given how modems work. But yeah, we don't know. But going back to the Apple Vision Pro, it's that I mean, it's not going to be a big thing here. Obviously, M5 better than M4. By far, it's going to be the best chip in like a VR headset or a mixed reality headset, from whichever angle you want to analyze the Apple Vision Pro. So yeah, I think that here you can also argue, well, maybe a 2 nanometer would give this more efficiency, longer battery life. But then again, you already have like your battery dangling from the Apple Vision Pro anyway. You're also most likely using the Apple Vision Pro only at home, so you're probably never far away from the charger. And when you're sitting down to watch a movie or playing a game, you probably are sitting down anyway with a cable going into your battery. So yeah, not talking down that obviously 2 nanometer would be good, but I don't think 2 nanometer is that needed here. Now, speaking of another N3P chip that I briefly mentioned, and that's the A19 Pro. The A19 Pro obviously being what we expect to power the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, and also the iPhone Air. The iPhone Air is rumored to be getting one with one fewer GPU core. So right now, the A19 Pro and the iPhone 17 Pro is rumored to come with 6 GPU cores, while the one for the 17 Air is going to be binned with one GPU core less, so with 5 GPU cores. It looks like the next gen iPad mini will get an A19 Pro chip that Apple uses in the iPhone 17 Pro models. The current iPad mini that came out in 2024 is equipped with the A17 Pro chip. So it makes sense. It would jump 2 generations. We don't know when exactly it's launching. We've heard rumors that there might be OLED iPad minis, or I don't know, to be quite honest. These leaks at that point are pretty old. I mean, Apple could surprise us and launch it for like the holiday season, or it could be late next year. We really don't know. There were even some rumors that there might not be like a big change up until 2027, which leaves us with the question, well, does it mean it's not getting OLED until 2027, but there will be like chip upgrades in between? or is there no upgrade at all coming until 2027? And is Apple aiming for like a 2.5 year gap here, or even like a 3 year gap from 2024? This is gonna be hard to sell to people on the current gen iPad mini, because this one is based on the A17 Pro, and if the low cost iPad gets an A18 chip, that's just gonna make the current gen iPad mini look really bad in comparison. So maybe Apple launches them simultaneously, like next spring, getting them ready for like the back to school season down the road. I don't know. Again, I have to speculate alongside those leaks and rumors, because otherwise there would be very little to talk about. Otherwise, I would just tell you to read the rumors yourself. But yeah, that's my perspective here. And next is actually the daddy of all chip rumors, and that one is a little bit weird. This is actually exclusive to Mac World, so this is not part of the big Mac rumors chip expose or news collage. By the way, guys, let me just quickly hide myself. I just need to turn on the lights here. Sorry, it was just getting way too dark. It was giving off the wrong vibes. It was more like a Halloween episode of Mark Tech, so I wanted to avoid just looking weird. I'm already sweating. I'm already covered with cat hair. So yeah, at least some decent lighting onto my face should help. Um, but speaking of the Mac Pro, this is this is so stupid, because I was so convinced that when Apple launched the M3 Ultra, they like John Turnus was basically out and about, even in interviews, but also in like official Apple statements, saying stuff like, not every generation M series is going to have an Ultra chip. And guess which Apple generation M series currently does not have an Ultra chip? Did the M1 have an Ultra? Yes. Did the M2 have an Ultra? Yes. Did the M3 eventually get the Ultra way later than we expected? Yes, even though we had, by the way, die shots that showed that the M3 Max does not have the necessary interconnect on the die to work with Ultra Fusion, so you can fuse two M3 Maxes in M3 Ultra. Now we were basically expecting, well, the next Ultra chip is going to be M5 Ultra. It might actually be, at least for a while, maybe a Mac Pro exclusive, right? Because the Mac Pro cost like $3,000 more than a similarly spec'd Mac Studio. So many people had like the expectation, well, maybe Apple is gonna say, you know what, Mac Studio stays on M3 Ultra, maybe up until M6 Ultra, or maybe for like half a year or so, while the M5 Ultra ships exclusively on the new Mac Pro. Well, but now there's a rumor that there is a Mac Pro potentially in the works with an M4 Ultra, which goes completely against what Apple has said, which goes, of course, completely against, even I would argue, common sense, because, like, why even launch the M3 Ultra at that point? I honestly have no idea. Now, this is internal code published by Apple, seen by Macworld. This is important because Apple could also just have that code in the in the broader code, right? It does not necessarily mean that they have still plans to launch this, but at least it could be an option, right? Maybe they've made an M4 Ultra that has that interconnect. Maybe M4 Ultra is actually more of a standalone chip that has like 60 GPU cores or something like that. It's codenamed Hydra, and there have been some weird rumors about that in the past, about what that would mean, whether it's a monolithic die or whether it's actually like an ultra fusion based system. It also begs the question, if it is ultra fusion based, is the current generation of ultra fusion actually good enough for M4? Right? Because if you think about it, the current generation Ultra Fusion is still the same on the M3 Ultra as it was on the M1 Ultra. Since then, interconnects have gotten a lot faster, a lot more efficient, right? It was pretty high end when Apple launched the M1 Ultra, but we have gotten better stuff since then. And with the M4 Max having more cores than the M3 Ultra, being based on faster memory than the M3 generation, right? 8533 megatransfers memory rather than 6400. Would potentially the current generation Ultra Fusion, that is older Ultra Fusion, potentially limit this? Or would Apple actually use a generation of chips that's about to be updated, right? M4 to M5, and actually give it a brand new interconnect, right? One that could last years into the future on newer chips. I have no idea. This is why this is so confusing. Presumably, this chip would have 32-core CPU, 80-core GPU. That's basically just doubling what we have on the M4 Max, and start with 96 gigs of RAM, and then go up to 512, which is the current limit of memory on the M3 Ultra. Yeah, but this rumor is very interesting, and it is connected to another rumor that I actually find similarly interesting, but also more believable, which is that there is a MacBook Pro in the works that could support 5G. So basically, this is coming from internal code similar to the M4 Ultra reveal we just talked about. We've of course have talked about Apple's efforts to build their own modems, whether it's the C series that started with the iPhone 16e and is rumored to come into the iPhone 17 Air, for example. There's also, of course, the Wi-Fi modems and Bluetooth modems that Apple is building. Well, it's one modem that builds Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and that's the Wi-Fi 6E/Wi-Fi 7 modem that I mentioned for like the HomePod and the Apple TV. Well, and seemingly they are trying to also make these new modems work with Macs. Now, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, of course, makes sense, right? I would not be surprised if in 2 to 3 years, every Apple device is built on an Apple Wi-Fi modem. What's interesting, of course, about the Mac is that Macs currently don't have 5G modems. The iPad has always been built to have a Wi-Fi version that's a little bit cheaper, and then 3G, then 4G, and then eventually 5G variants for those who don't always want to rely on the hotspot of their iPhone. Or like public Wi-Fi and shit like that. So I myself, for example, use a 5G enabled iPad, my M1 iPad Pro. Well, now there is code. It's powered by the M5 Pro chip. So that's basically what we expect to come out like next January or so. Codename T6050. And that one is supposedly being tested with cellular connectivity. Now that's important because we've had rumors in the past that Apple would give Macs some kind of cellular connectivity, but with much of it, we expected it to like have to wait up until like C3, C4 generations, maybe. So who knows? This could be one of the first devices to be powered by like a C2 modem or something like that. Though, interestingly enough, the code suggests it's powered by the Centauri chip, which is the C1, which would be a little bit disappointing. Now, I should note that a 5G modem is better than no 5G modem. It's not like it's competing here versus like Qualcomm modems or stuff like that, or even a Samsung modem. But I would prefer Apple waited. And to be noted that this is part of internal code. It's the same thing that I just mentioned about the M4 Ultra Mac Pro, right? By saying just because it's being tested with the M4 Ultra doesn't mean it's actually gonna launch with it. And my statements hold similarly well for this 5G enabled MacBook Pro, which is just because Apple is currently testing it with a Centauri or a C1 modem, doesn't mean that it's going to come out with any 5G modem, but there might have been some internal code that's being missed here, where Apple has also tested it out with like a successor, a C2 or something like that, or some kind of Qualcomm modem. Maybe it's more like, maybe this is purely just for gathering data, right? And they're saying, oh, it performs this well with C1. Maybe in a year we can make it actually work that well with a C2 that we can launch it to the mass audience. But then again, Apple deemed the C1 good enough for a $600 iPhone. So if they charge $150, maybe $200, it's an upgrade path for a MacBook to get 5G. Sure, it might not be the fastest 5G ever, but if it reliably gives you 200, even 300 megabits per second down, it benefits from the larger antenna on the Mac. It has potentially even less of a battery impact than it does on the iPhone, because obviously the battery is proportionally so much bigger on the Mac. I could still see this working, but then again, don't forget, all of this is internal code. Some of it could be for actual future products. Some of it could be only for internal testing, for preparing future generations and things like that. So I'm actually not sure if we are done with the chip news. Well, speaking of that M5 based MacBook Pro, I think I've talked about it in prior streams, but I've also, of course, mentioned it on Discord, which is for a while it's now been rumored that it might actually be a 2026 product. This might not actually be a delay based on logistics or supply or anything like that. There's been talk that Apple might just want to diversify their launches, right, in terms of when things is happening. So a lot of stuff currently is happening like between September, October, November, right? And Apple might just want to push the Mac out of that timeline so that it can have its own spot for longer. It's a little bit less connected to the iPhone releases, to iPad releases, and things like that, right? Now, actually, I believe the last chip news here is the A20 chip for the next generation iPhones. Obviously, the next generation iPhones being at that point the iPhone 18 series. Now, will it be called that, or will Apple get rid of the numbers by the time they launch the iPhone Fold alongside it, or the iPhone Ultra, or whatever it's going to be called? That I couldn't say. Obviously, the A20 chip is going to be built on a 2nm node. Now, currently, it's being rumored to be a simple 2nm node, right? However, it could also be N2P. A lot of stuff that's being rumored for late 2026, it's currently being rumored, like Intel Snover Lake and AMD Zen 6. Those chips are actually being rumored to, at least in terms of their main CPU, to be built on N2P or N2X if we're talking servers. So is Apple gonna be a little bit behind AMD? Well, it would still make sense if the iPhone launches like 3 months before Zen 6 comes out. If Zen 6 is introduced very late in 2026, it might not even be substantially out before early 2027. Well, obviously, the iPhone has to be sold in the tens of millions as early as September. So again, if it's 2nm or N2P, doesn't matter. Min-Chi Kuo also mentions alongside the new Note, which of course also comes with new tech like GAFET or gate all-around transistors up from FinFET, there's also a change to the processor packaging technology, and it's switching from INFO to WMCM, and WMCM stands for Wafer Level Multi-Chip Module. It uses molding underfill, and this is again where my expertise now completely disconnects from what I'm talking about. This is me now regurgitating something somebody else has said, and I will try to comment on it, but I'm probably not going to be able to supply any kind of crazy takes here. But this technology, WMCM, based on MUF, integrates underfill and molding processes. It reduces material consumption and process steps to improve yields and efficiency. What does any of that mean? Great questions. WMCM allows different components like the SoC and DRAM to be integrated directly at the wafer level before being diced into individual chips. It uses a technique that connects the dies without needing an interposer substrate. Again, this is going to be huge for technologies eventually, like the next wave of Apple M Ultra chips. Apple is already being rumored to switch to chiplets on the M5 Pro and M5 Max. So separate CPU dies, separate GPU dies. What it means for latency or performance loss or energy efficiency impact, we don't know. M5 is already using a new packaging technology, so we'll have to see how noticeably different this makes this. But obviously then a switch to 2 nanometer will have some other advantages as well. There's also been rumors that Apple would go more aggressive in the way they integrate RAM into the SoC. That could mean like basically making it like a chiplet that has like full speed access and has much lower latency and much lower power consumption that is traditionally associated with DRAM, even LPDDR, which is low power DRAM. And there's been even rumors that Apple would eventually switch to some form of high bandwidth memory. High bandwidth memory being not that different from traditional DRAM. It even uses very similar DRAM modules, but they're stacked on top of each other rather than next to each other. In fact, when you look, for example, at big GPUs with dedicated memory like GDDR6, 6S, and even 7 these days, they're spread pretty wide across the SoC and the motherboard. Well, they're around the SoC and across the motherboard because they also generate quite a lot of heat, and they even need like a decent amount of power being pushed into them, so they cannot be too hot, too close to the SoC, or it's all gonna overheat. HBM memory, because those RAM modules are stacked on top of each other, now that's a complicated process and it's very costly, but it effectively increases your bandwidth again and again and again with every stacked module. And it, of course, reduces latency, because now instead of your chip communicating with memory, or there's a little bit of memory to the left and to the right and down and on, no, now it's just communicating to one stack, maybe 2 stack of memory, and that stack has increased memory bandwidth. Again, it's a much more expensive way to deal with memory, but it is a solution, especially in servers, especially in like high power AI workflows. And so could WMCM allow Apple to like create a mobile version of HBM, right? Like double memory bandwidth, triple memory bandwidth versus what we currently have on iPhones and iPads? I don't know, but it could connect to all of those rumors, right? Again, no need for an interposer or substrate, so we wouldn't need that interposer that we are known, for example, from ultrafusion. Which helps with thermals and signal integrity benefits. So signal integrity, for example, is what causes higher latency. It's what also causes potentially performance degradation. If you have 2 dies communicating via an interposer or substrate, ultrafusion, for example, does not have perfect scaling for, especially for big GPU tasks. In other words, Apple's next gen chip won't just be smaller and more power efficient. Well, if it's going to be smaller, I don't know, because I mean, probably for cost reasons it will be, but hopefully Apple doesn't actually make it too small, because you want that higher transistor density to actually result in more transistors, not just in a smaller chip. More power efficient, sure. It will also be physically closer to its onboard memory. Well, if Apple actually decides to go fully on board with WMCM, sure, enabling better performance and potentially lower power consumption for tasks like AI processing and high-end gaming. We have do to know saying hi. I don't actually remember seeing you in the chat before, so welcome to the stream, bro. So and now I think we are done actually with chip rumors for the moment. Oh, Safari. Okay, I thought for a second that Safari on the latest beta does not want to update itself. Okay, let's start with the iPhone 17, because we've already talked, of course, about the A19 Pro chip that's going to be powering it. We've talked in previous streams about the colors, about the switch from titanium to aluminum, about that elongated camera bar. We even talked about the wait. Have I actually reacted to it live? I actually don't think. Majin Buu antenna iPhone 17 Pro. I think I only reacted to this on Discord, actually. Do they link to the original? Oh, yeah, thank God. I hate it when sites like this don't link to the original architecture, to the original. Yeah, this is 3 days old, so yeah, I definitely have not streamed about this. So let's start with this, because this is actually a hardware rumor, and this is coming from pretty reliable leaker Majin Buu, who is saying that elongated camera bar is not just an aesthetic decision from Apple, but it's actually part of a new internal layout that has repositioned antennas, and with it has new antenna lines. Now, one interesting thing, I actually don't know if those antenna lines still extend into the aluminum here. I would think they do, but that's actually an interesting thing that I have missed. So basically, Apple is using this space, which is also much less likely to be covered by your hand, right? I mean, if we go back to Steve Jobs and the old "you're holding it wrong" debate, this is going to help you to not hold it wrong, right? So it pushes the antennas more towards the back and towards the top. So let's read what Majin Buu has to say. According to my source, Apple is set to introduce a significant structural change in the iPhone 17 Pro, the repositioning of antennas around the rear camera module. This design choice mirrored the approach used in the Apple Watch Ultra, where antennas are strategically integrated to maximize reception and signal stability. Why move the antennas? Current iPhone models place antennas along the chassis edges with visible breaks in the frame. For the iPhone 17 Pro, Apple aims to reduce interference from chassis materials. Now, this is going to happen regardless. If they actually switch from titanium to aluminum, aluminum has much better radio frequency transparency than titanium, so that will help. With 5G and Wi-Fi 7 connectivity. Positioning antennas around the camera module leverages an area less prone to shielding and interference, improving performance in congested environments and ensuring a stable connection on the go. It should be noted, of course, if Apple uses more metal in the device, right? Like these parts are supposed to go from glass to metal. That also now makes sense to strengthen antenna, whether it's the antennas itself, whether it's the modems, right, or whether it's just to create more space for the antennas to leak through still through that aluminum. So even though aluminum is better for radio frequency transparency than titanium, if Apple uses more metal than glass this time around, they would need to compensate for it. Also, the overall elevated space of this camera module could literally put like your antenna closer to the outside world. I know it sounds stupid in that regard, but I mean, think about it, right? You would think that, oh, it doesn't make that much difference, but like that's why people extended like their phones in the 90s, right, with those crazy antennas. And sure, that might only be literally a millimeter more, but yeah, in this case, every millimeter literally counts. It's inspired by the Apple Watch Ultra, which I usually wear one. Not today, it's way too hot. But yeah, that one has like those antenna rings running around actually the titanium designed. It's part of that multi-band antenna system. The radiation pattern defines the spatial distribution of an antenna's electromagnetic energy. In traditional setups, the user's hand and internal metal components can distort this pattern, reducing coverage. By repositioning antennas around the, in this case, glass camera module, Apple achieves more uniform main lobe distribution, interesting, fewer shadow zones, higher efficiency, and overall, it could deliver enhanced radio performance, reduced latency, cleaner side frame design. So that's interesting. It seems like it could. He is not committing to there not being further like cuts here. And the optimized internal space for the battery and thermal systems. I have argued time and time again that part of the reason why Apple making this big camera island is also just to add like 1 millimeter of extra thickness for this area, whether it's going to be used for a much more advanced zoom camera. And don't forget, this could happen this year or next year. Apple is planning in advance. They might just give it redesigns that are going to benefit you in a year or two, but hey, they're going to have some extra space already in the meantime. They can literally stack more cooling under a taller glass frame, right? They can literally make more antenna space here, right? And the more they push up in there, right, in the top portion, well, now in the lower portion, they have more space for larger batteries and things like that, better speakers. So yeah, more space, always better. Obviously, you don't want to make your device too thick, too heavy, but yeah, if you're wondering why Apple is making certain decisions, ultimately, it's either to make the device more effective to build, whether it's cheaper or faster, right? That way they can actually ship more devices because it's cheaper potentially, so more people can buy it, or because they can make them faster, and that way they don't have any supply shortages for like the holiday seasons or stuff like that, or they make the device better, in which case people perceive them as better value, and then they're also more likely to buy those products. Now, speaking of the value of those products, a great segue, Mark, is that we now have several leaks. And usually I don't cover pricing leaks because unless it's like a day before and it's Mark Gurman, which means it's not even like an internal Apple leak, but he likely heard something from like press people. Usually I don't really listen to pricing leaks. This one is seemingly getting corroborated by many people. So there is a rumor that the base iPhone 17 Pro is going to come with 256 gigabytes of storage, but not anymore start at $999, which has been the starting price for the Pro or good or main iPhone ever since the iPhone 10. But instead, it's going to come at and I apologize, at $1049. And that would actually be effectively a price reduction because the current 256 gigabyte model of the iPhone 17 Pro actually starts at $1099. Now, again, this would be roughly the lineup. iPhone 17 with 128 gigabytes, 17 Pro now with 256 gigabytes at $1049, 17 Pro Max still $200 more expensive, but now also with the same amount of storage. So that actually makes the Pro Max kind of a worse value than it was before. And the Air roughly rumored to be a little bit more expensive than the iPhone 16 Plus that it's somewhat replacing. No exact storage information, given that we're talking about $150 price difference. I would wager it's probably 128 gigabytes. It could still be 256, to be quite honest, though, because don't forget, while sure we are talking about a larger device than the base iPhone 17, we're also looking at a device with one fewer camera. We're looking at a device without stereo speakers, at least like in the traditional iPhone sense, and we're looking at a device with actually a smaller battery. Now, that device would have a better chip with more RAM, and that device would have like a titanium body rather than aluminum body. So it remains a coin toss. I think if it started at just around 1,000, my instinct would be to say it's going to start with 256 gigabytes. That being said, I honestly don't know, and it has not been corroborated since. But yeah, it seems like more and more people are agreeing with at least one fact, that the base iPhone 17 Pro is now starting at 256 gigabytes, and we're very likely seeing, at least in the United States, some kind of pricing change to reflect the impact of tariffs. Now, it should be noted that tariffs are incredibly fluid, and you don't know if they're going to be tomorrow at all, or if they're going to be twice as high. So the actual final pricing, I'm very much convinced, is still up in the air up until probably a week before the official launch. Yeah, but that's about it for the iPhone 17 Pro, and now we're gonna talk a little bit AI. And I was actually looking to Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter, because I thought we might actually get something, but yeah, it's gonna be it's not been a week. I don't know why I thought that, right? But no, he actually has dedicated reports on Bloomberg that sit outside of the Power On newsletter, and here he talks about Apple's AI plans, Apple's robot plans, Apple's Siri plans. Let's start with something smaller, but that is still meaningful, which is that Siri, well, for one, Mark Gurman has committed that Apple is working on iOS 26.4 that has A19 Siri, personal context Siri, and things like that, right? But and it's seemingly in a good stage. Apple believes internally that they can actually make it work by like the spring of next year. But apparently the company has even bigger plans. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman on Wednesday reported that Apple is preparing a visually redesigned version of Siri that will debut on the iPhone and iPad as early as next year. He did not provide any specific details about the new design. It's like Mark Gurman loves doing that. You know that, guys. Gurman said that Apple is planning a tabletop robot for release in 2027. On that, he said that Apple has tested making Siri look like an animated version of Mac's Finder logo, which is obviously this one here. But he said that the company was also considering ideas that look more like Memoji. Obviously, we might be 2 years away from this, if this is going to be like a late 2027 release. And again, given Apple's current AI track record, it could very much slip into 2028. But yeah, this is apparently the current stage of Apple working on it. It is unclear if Siri would get a lifelike avatar on the iPhone and iPad too. So he does not commit to those design changes, also connecting to these design changes. Apple already redesigned Siri last year, but only on iPhone and iPad models that support Apple Intelligence. I don't know why this is mentioned, because I don't think that Apple is ever gonna redesign the non-Apple Intelligent Siri on like devices that are older than the iPhone 15 Pro. It seems Siri will be getting a lot better next year. Said that iPhone and iPad users will be able to take action within apps. It's interesting, Mark Gurman seems to be really obsessed with app intents. He seems to be much less interested in personal context. I guess on screen on-screen awareness really plays into app intents. Yeah, but it's interesting that, like, in his reporting, he seems to be downplaying the other features of LLM Siri. But yeah, seemingly all of that is expected to arrive with iOS 26.4. And Mark Gurman describes this as following: with nothing but your voice, you'll be able to tell Siri to find a specific photo, edit it, send it off, or comment on an Instagram post, or scroll a shopping app. Again, I don't know why you would want to control this with a voice. I get it because of accessibility reasons, but honestly, I don't think that these are tasks that are going to be made faster by AI. I think these are tasks that are already pretty much perfect with touch input, with mouse and keyboard input. Yeah, but like, you could scroll a shopping app, add something to your cart, log into a service without touching the screen. Again, this also has other ramifications. Like, this brings up questions about, like, how does privacy and security being handled? Like, we just got a report that on-screen awareness and app intents, for example, might not be designed for banking apps, right? So the way that you log in and scroll, for example, through a social media app might not be allowed in a banking app, so that Siri could not potentially mess up like crucial banking information, send it to the wrong person. I mean, send your money to the wrong person inside the app. So yeah, again, I don't even need those features. I would never like trust like an indirect system, like where I scream at the device to do something rather than just tapping a few buttons. If I need something to happen automatically, then I will just automate the actual process, right? I'll tell my banking app, send this amount of money every month to this other account. I would not want Siri to do that. There's also more Apple Home stuff in that regard. So Apple is working on a smart home hub that's expected in 2026. So that's like the HomePad, for example, that features the screen. That's gonna come out when the new version of Siri is ready. So it's very likely that the hardware for it is already ready, and Apple probably has HomeOS mostly ready, but they are waiting for the new Siri to be there. But Apple has bigger plans to launch accessories for the smart home. And one of those devices is being described the following. The device has facial recognition and infrared sensor to determine who's in a room. Apple believes users will place cameras throughout their home to help with automation. That could mean turning lights off when someone leaves the room, or automatically playing music like by a particular family member. This to me is absolutely worthless. The only time I would ever want a camera in a regular room is like, I guess, like a baby monitoring camera. I guess if I'm ever rich, like, I might install it to like make sure that like my mates don't steal stuff. But that's such an XQC argument. That's not really a life I ever want to live, to be quite honest. This is gonna be weird. Now, if we're talking like security cameras, like at your door, and maybe you would have a camera leading, like, I don't know, like, I guess you could say one per room, but at least like one per like major door or whatever, to make sure that you can have footage if like your house is ever like burgled. Jesus Christ, I have hair and it's a difficult word to say. If your house is ever broken into, I don't know. There's definitely, Apple has been working on like home security products, including a doorbell that uses facial recognition for unlocking a door. That to me makes perfect sense. And I would trust Apple. I would hope that they integrated with some kind of insurance where I am actually protected because I bought a product from Apple. And if Apple decides ever that like a burglar at my door and they open it to them because he looks a bit like me, then I would want Apple to pay me, to reimburse me. But yeah, I don't know. I think that Apple has a good foundation to enter this market, specifically because Apple has a lot of trust with regards to security and privacy. That being said, of course, whether or not these products actually make it to market, whether they have enough differentiation features to make sure that they can succeed in the market with a lot of cheap alternatives, I don't know. A lot of these devices these days um, are combined with like a subscription service. Some of them are basically unusable without some cloud storage that's mostly provided, of course, by the company that built the product. Apple could, of course, leverage here like iCloud, but they could also say, you know what, our product might be more expensive up front, but if you have iCloud Plus already, it just integrates with your 2 terabytes of storage or more. Um, and then everything else is up to you. Maybe you can book some additional 500 gigabytes or something like that specifically for this service. And now it's a lot cheaper because it's just extra storage on top of storage you already book. But then again, this is speculation, but this is also an advantage that I could see Apple leverage here. With the robot virtual companion, and I'm sorry, I'm now blasting through some of those last stories because I don't think they're that big, because I don't think they're that detailed. But this one, of course, is interesting. Apple is supposedly working on a Pixar lamp like robot. This actually is very reminiscent of that white paper that they published, including, I think it was available through Newsroom, where they talked about how they are trying to make robots in the home more personal. Obviously, they want it to be driven by your data. So if your phone is in the room or it's all connected via iCloud, that robot knows how to react to you. It would obviously accept similar inputs and similar commands to like Siri. And this tabletop robot is reported on by Bloomberg is coming in 2027. Again, with Apple's current track record in AI, could very much slip by a year or so. The device features a 7-inch iPad-like display, which could be the same display, knowing Apple, that they're using for the HomePad. It's mounted on a movable arm, and this is very important because we have had a rumor of that HomePad having a movable arm, right? Like similar to what obviously I have here with like my microphone arm, right? For quite a while. But maybe we actually misunderstood what was happening, and instead of Apple having like a movable arm that's just for adjusting the screen, maybe the movable arm itself could be like the biggest part of the product, right? And instead of being a big part of the HomePad, or maybe the HomePad gets like an early version of it, like Apple's robot, that tabletop robot, could get a much more complicated, much more involved, and much more costly robotic arm. That movable arm can rotate and extend around 6 inches in any direction, allowing the robot to reposition itself to face whoever is speaking. Some people at Apple apparently refer it to as the Pixar lamp, which, to anybody who watches this and does not know what the Pixar lamp is, which is how do you go through life, but okay. That's, of course, the Pixar lamp. And in terms of video, I actually am not gonna play the video because it could be demonetized. But yeah, it basically has those mechanical parts, so it can look at you, right? And the light bulb is kind of its face and its eye. And if it light up, that's where it pays attention towards. It's kind of how the Eye of Sauron works in Mordor, I guess. Yeah, but supposedly Apple is working on this kind of robot for 2027. The idea is for the device to act like a person in the room. It could interrupt a conversation between friends about dinner plans, say and suggest nearby restaurants or relevant recipes. Obviously, Apple would need to have quite an involved version of Siri by that point. It's also being designed to engage in back and forth discussion for things like planning a trip. No idea why like all AI stuff is currently being like trained to plan trips. Like, I want to plan my own trips. It's my holiday. I want, like, it's part of the process. It's actually really enjoyable to decide where to go. It's weird. or getting tasks done, which again, if it's more about calendars, reminders, alarms, then I'm much more on board with. Similar to OpenAI's voice mode, Apple's tabletop robot will support FaceTime calls with a center stage-like feature. Again, these are all features that in a way have been for a while rumored for that HomePad, right? So maybe the HomePad is either the first version of this, or the HomePad doesn't actually get many of those features. Now, I still assume it's going to get FaceTime and probably something center stage like, but it might not be as involved as being able to rotate its screen basically 360 degrees to extend its arm, right? I think if it's going to have some pivot mechanism, it's going to be very minimal relatively. It might also be manual for the most part, right? Maybe it adjusts slightly, but then again, if it has center stage, if it has a very wide, ultra wide, then it might not even need to, as we've seen with stuff like the iMac, right? It might even be like facing up slightly, but because the center stage camera is so wide, not two, it still sees you in front of it. It can even still like record like your keyboard and trackpad underneath if you wanted to. At the current time, the robot is in the prototyping stage, so final decisions such as Siri's visual design have not been made. Apple is aiming for a 2027 launch, but again, products have been delayed in the past. And speaking of the HomePad that I've mentioned now, of course, with that movable arm that's now seemingly such a big focus of Apple's internal robot, well, this is also coming from Mark Gurman, also coming from an article that's not integrated with his Power On newsletter, so I'm not paying for that. But apparently it's not gonna launch until mid-2026, which makes sense because we expect the new version of Siri to launch by like April of next year. Gurman previously said that it would debut as soon as 2025, but it basically got delayed alongside changes to Apple Intelligence version of Siri. It will have a 7-inch display and speaker. Again, more similarities being shared between this upcoming HomePad and this upcoming robot. It would look similar to a Google Nest Hub. It should be noted that early rumors about this product very much focused also on the HomePod aspect, so that it would still have great speakers. That has been very much less the focus, unfortunately, in recent months. So I'm not sure. Again, I still hope we actually get a real HomePad where I hopefully don't have to pay money for a robotic arm and screen that I never use, so that I can just use those two HomePods as stereo speakers connected through my Apple TV to my LG TV and my PlayStation 5 Pro. But I digress. That's just my personal priority. So 7-inch display and speaker looks similar to Google Nest Hub. Is described as shaped like a square with thin, so it has absolutely nothing to do with this render. Great. With thin black or white bezels. I hope that they actually have white bezels. I think for a product that sits in your home, that's more inviting. Rounded corners and a half dome shaped base. Well, I guess then it still has something in common with this render. The hub, which is codenamed J490, will run an operating system codenamed Charismatic, which I call HomeOS here. It's different from iOS, macOS, and tvOS. It's designed to be used by multiple members of the household. So guest mode, I guess that's part of the OS experience without having to log in or out. Probably either Face ID sensors or some voice recognition based user changing system. The interface centers on clock faces and widgets, so those are things that Apple has learned from the Apple Watch. And it could have a Siri virtual interface that gives Siri a more personalized look. Apple is said to be testing a look for Siri that resembles the Mac Finder icon. Again, this could mean, if Apple is really focusing this all around Siri, they might delay this up until the launch of iOS 27, so they can launch it not just with a better version of Siri, but with this redesigned version of Siri. And once again, this Mac Finder icon look, that's also something that's kind of being shared between the rumor for this HomePad, which again is as I call it, smart home hub, whatever, right? But it's something that it would have in common with that eventual robot. A front-facing camera will scan a person's face as they approach, providing content and features specific to each user. Again, AI would need to also be at work to say, oh, there are actually two people. How do I keep them apart? Or maybe with voice profiles and stuff like that. There won't be a dedicated app store, but the device will run Apple apps like calendar, camera, music, reminders, and notes. This is something that I could see changing down the road, especially if it has a good chip inside, like an A18 or whatever. But I could also see Apple just making it rely a lot on like your iPhone or your iPad that are in the room. Similar thing how like the original Apple Watch needed your iPhone for compute for the apps that technically were on your Apple Watch, but were actually very much running from your iPhone. It could also just be that it might not have a dedicated app store by itself, but that maybe third-party apps could still have app versions that are compatible with this. That's also similar to the Apple Watch, which does have its own app store, but basically if you have an Home Hub version of an app that's on your iPhone, that app could be automatically installed on your Home Hub. But just without the ability to control what apps are installed without your iPhone. Apple expects users to control the smart home with voice-based commands. It does have a touchscreen, so at least Apple is not going the Mac route here. References to J490 have already been found in Apple's code, and I should note also for quite a while actually. Siri will be central to the hub. Apple is working, so I actually activated her on my iPad. Apple wants Siri to be able to incorporate personal data and on-screen awareness and app intents, right? So plenty of stuff that is going to be very beneficial for a product like this. It was originally designed for like late iOS 18, but obviously now it's going to be some version of iOS 26. Who knows? Maybe it might be pushed even further away. A visually redesigned version of Siri for iPhones and iPads could also come at some point in 2026. Whether or not that again coincides with iOS 26.4 and just the LLM version of Siri, again, it could also come with some rebranding. Apple might not want to publicly say, you know what, we are turning away from Siri because of all the stuff that's gone wrong. They could also just say, you know what, Siri has changed so much and we are bringing it to completely new products like the Smart Home Hub. Let us actually rename her and see where we go from there. Yeah, but this is basically like all depends on like Apple's progress with AI. And for products like these, I really hope that Apple's internal AI efforts bear fruit. I've always said I don't need Apple to design a general chatbot. We've talked about even in very recent streams about Apple Answers, right? Their like chatbot-like version of Siri. But like they need to get at least LLM Siri right? A more conversational Siri, a Siri that's much better at understanding language nuance, that doesn't need like very like hard-coded input, right? Like if you're saying increase brightness, it should also understand like make the screen brighter, or Siri, it's too dim, or something like that, right? Which a lot of it's kind of already there, but Apple has also said in the past that they have tried to make a Siri that's kind of split in two. So there's the dumb version, but also the new LLM version, and there would be some kind of algorithm deciding which version of Siri gives you the response. Seems like Apple is very much going forward on making all Siri based on LLM, further redesigning it. I assume that if they ever make something like chatbot out of Siri, then they would also need an interface that keeps track of things you ask. Like that's one thing that's great about the ChatGPT integration with Siri actually. You ask it and then like if you forget it, you don't even need to like ask it again. If you are logged into your ChatGPT account, and you then go to your ChatGPT app, then you will actually still see all your prompts, including the ones that you made through Siri. So it basically has no negative impact on me that Apple has not yet made their own ChatGPT. And with how negatively received ChatGPT 5 is currently, which Apple has promised to integrate right away with iOS 26, I'm not even sure that Apple needs to worry that much. I doubt they will ever like fully keep up with Google Gemini or with ChatGPT because they don't monetize their AI efforts. At least they say they don't have any immediate plans to do so. So they won't build the same server infrastructure. They won't build the same like dozens of different versions of it. One that's more optimized for code compiling, one image generation, one general chatbot, one a search engine, right? But if they really optimize it to know what's happening on your device, how can I privately and efficiently access your personal data for context, for your queries, how do I even give commands to your device? So if you want to do something like scroll through a shopping app and add something to your cart because it's been programmed as part of app intents, well, Siri should be able to do that. Even though I think it's worthless, I think a lot of people will have quite some fun with that, and it will tell them that Apple is not lagging behind at least as much in the AI race as it seems right now. Well, I think that's about it for today. I think I've covered like 15 topics today, all in all. And I do have to go back to install all the betas right now, like the second version of iOS and iPadOS, like the second developer versions, which are basically in line with the public beta releases. And I will let you know how those perform in future videos. But yeah, my voice is going away. It's not as hot anymore, but I'm still sweaty and covered with cat hair. I thank you, everyone who found the chat, found the stream, joined the chat. Again, a shout out for all you guys to go to the Discord. It's such a great place where similarly minded people exchange ideas. Just also give you public service announcements about the latest topics and stuff like that. Some of them are more AI interested. Some of them are more general OS interested. Some are just purely there for processor talk. I think you will find quite a lot to like there. It's growing, and I will share it out more and stuff like Twitter so we can attract more people down the line. Thank you so much. Again, I hope to be streaming again by Sunday, maybe, and then hopefully I'll be able to stream on Wednesday of next week when Google is making their Pixel 10 event live. And, and when the iPhone 17 events happen, then you'll expect me to be streaming at least like 3-4 times, once before it, once during, 2-3 times after that. So don't worry, plenty of coverage from me. I'll be pretty busy from mid-September to mid-October. I'll still try to stream at least once a week. I'll try not to do like 10-day hiatuses like I did from the last video to today. But just so you're warned, if you're still interested in watching me and enjoying this content, subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment. Again, you can become a direct supporter here via super chats or super stickers. You can become a channel member or a Patreon supporter. And of course, just liking the video, just watching alongside us, that helps tremendously. So thank you very much for that. As always, let me know what else you would like to see me cover next. I'll see you then. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.